Louise and a very warm welcome to today's video. So today is Thursday the 4th of February and it's official Time to Talk Day, which is run by the amazing mental health charity Time to Change. Time to Change is a charity that campaigns to change the way people think and act about mental health, and Time to Talk Day is such an important campaign of theirs because it's all about encouraging us all to talk more openly about mental health. The more we talk about mental health, the more myths we can bust and the more barriers we can break down, helping to end the isolation, shame and worthlessness that too many sufferers of mental illness are sadly made to feel. We desperately need to get the nation talking about mental health so we can come closer to ending mental health stigma and discrimination. This year's Time to Talk Day is focused on the power of small, because however we can have a conversation about mental health, it really will have the power to make such a big difference. Also, for the whole of this week, it's also Children's Mental Health Week, which is run by the amazing charity Place to Be. This is such an important campaign and it helps raise awareness about the importance of our children's mental health. This year's focus for Children's Mental Health Week is Express Yourself. Children need a way to process and make sense of their experiences, but as neuroscience shows us, simply talking about problems often isn't enough. That's where the power of creativity becomes an essential healing tool, because it offers the means for children to work things out as well as express their feelings and tell their stories. In doing so, children can envision a better, more hopeful future. 1 in 6 school children in the UK now has a diagnosable mental disorder, which is an increase from 1 in 9 in 2017. Effective support from an early stage not only helps children and young people cope with challenging life circumstances, but it also can prevent problems from escalating and becoming more serious in adolescence and adulthood. Okay, so some of you might be aware that mental health is a subject that's extremely close to my heart. This is for lots of reasons. I have personally been on my own long battle with mental illness since childhood. I also have close family members and close friends that have also been affected by mental illness. Raising awareness about mental health using information and facts is very important, but the most effective way of spreading awareness and understanding and getting people to talk is by hearing about people's personal experiences. So, in honour of Time to Talk Day and Children's Mental Health Week, I've decided to share some of my mental health journey with you. This is in the hope that I can encourage others to open up and talk about their mental health without feeling any shame or embarrassment. It's so important that people gain a better understanding about what it's like to live with a mental illness and how there is such a serious lack of mental health services and support available as well to those whose lives are affected. So today's video is covering the first part of my mental health journey, where I'll be talking about my experiences suffering with mental health and mental illness as a child and how it affected me while I was growing up to the age of 12. Part 2 will be covering my battles during my teens and up to my age of 20. Part 3 will be my experiences through my 20s and then part 4 will be my 30s up to the present day. So without further ado, let's get started. So I have suffered with my mental health my entire life, and I truly believe that I was born this way. I think it was inherited or in my genes, if you like. I can remember as a child, I was aware early on that the other children at school didn't seem to panic and worry about things the way I did. Obviously at the age of 4 or 5, I didn't know what these feelings were, what they were called or why I had them. All I knew was that I had these horrible thoughts and feelings that just wouldn't go away. And I look back now at my younger self and feel sad because I was constantly carrying around a weight and darkness with me when I should have been carefree and enjoying just being a child. I remember if I was feeling worried or panicky about something, I would sometimes ask a friend if they were feeling the same, expecting them to say yes. If I felt it, then surely everyone else did too, but they'd look at me with a bit of a confused look on their face, not understanding quite what I was talking about. Not understanding why I was feeling these horrible feelings made my little world quite a lonely place to be. So tragically, when I was around 7 or 8, a friend in my class was killed suddenly in a car accident while driving to have a picnic in the Easter holidays. This devastated me and I began to develop an unhealthy fixation with death and just couldn't understand how someone, let alone a child, could just be taken away like that. I'd only said goodbye to her a few days before when we broke up for the Easter holidays, and my little head just couldn't comprehend it. My thoughts could be quite dark sometimes, and I remember one of my favourite places to go on a Saturday with my mum was to this lovely place called Christchurch. There was a river there where you could feed the ducks. There were shops, a park to play in, and a beautiful walk to go on where there were like ancient ruins to see and things. But my favourite place to visit there was the Christchurch Priory Cemetery. It seems so peaceful, and I think about my poor friend and wonder where she might be now, what it would have been like for her, had she felt any pain, had she felt scared, and I'd wonder often if she was now in heaven. As a child, I just didn't have the capacity to be able to articulate or express to anyone how I was feeling. I couldn't have begun to have known the words to describe my feelings, and I somehow just kept going because I didn't know any different. I didn't understand, and I had no other choice. The older I got, my anxiety worsened, and I ended up developing a full-blown phobia of school. It was about everything about school, worrying I'd forget something, worrying that I'd get something wrong, worried I wouldn't understand the work. The smell of the school affected me. Worried about assemblies when we were all packed into the gym hall. I worried about getting told off, worried about being away from home and away from my mum. I worried what the other kids thought of me. I worried I wasn't good enough. I felt embarrassed to eat in front of people at lunch. I worried about PE. I thought I was fat, ugly, repulsive, and I was always scared of the older kids at school. I did suffer from a bit of bullying, which just made me feel even more worthless and caused my self-esteem to decrease even more. At the weekends, if I was out shopping with my mum and I saw someone from school, it would send me into a blind panic. When I'd see someone from school, it would feel like I wasn't safe anymore, and it would just remind me of school and make me feel all the feelings of anxiety that I felt about school. I would just want to leave and go straight home. I was always worried about bumping into someone from school, which made me very, very anxious. Unfortunately, on top of the difficult issues I already had, I also experienced some other traumas during my childhood, which would only make things worse and would affect me even further. Around the age of 7, an older child subjected me to something that, as a child of that age, I just did not have the emotional capacity or maturity to understand. And this led me to believe that any male that I didn't know or didn't trust would potentially want to do the same thing to me. I became very uneasy around men and just remember thinking, that's a man, so he must want to do the same thing to me as the other person did. I also experienced emotional abuse on and off throughout my childhood by an adult, which at the time my parents didn't know anything about and weren't aware of. I didn't open up and talk to them about it until I was an adult. And this caused me a great deal of distress, but I didn't say anything to my parents because at the time I just presumed and believed that for a grown-up to treat me like that, then I must have been really, really bad, and therefore I must have deserved it. Teachers at school started noticing that something wasn't quite right, and my mum had an angry phone call from one of my school friends' mums saying that I wasn't allowed to be friends with her anymore, with her daughter anymore, because I had been talking to her one day and told her that I wanted to die, and she told her mum. I was then referred to see a child psychologist. Remembering what it was like having to go to that clinic and see those doctors literally gives me shivers when I think about it. I remember I'd be sat in a room and be told that behind the mirror that was in the room there would be people watching me and recording me while I would be asked questions. They were not friendly or warm in any way at the clinic. It was all really formal. They didn't make any effort to make me or my family feel relaxed or comfortable in any way. They made me feel as though I had done something wrong, and it felt more like an interrogation. And instead of making my poor parents feel supported, they made them feel interrogated too. Instead of helping and supporting my poor parents, they just utterly failed them and failed me too. My poor parents were just trying to get help for me, and they also needed help, advice and support themselves, but they didn't get it. I not only feel really angry for my parents, I also feel so sad for them. They were doing their very best, but they just didn't get the help and support that they should have had. By the time I was 11 and ready to leave primary school, I was often having suicidal thoughts and experienced awful panic attacks. The first full-blown panic attack I remember was when I was around 10 years old. I'd had panic attacks before, but this panic attack was different and on a completely other level, and something that I would have to experience regularly from then on. The only way I can describe my panic attacks is like a massive wave would suddenly come over me where my ears would almost shut off, and all I could hear was the sound of my heart thumping and racing. My eyes blur and go out of focus, and I start to feel a sensation as though I'm disconnecting from reality. I feel as though I'm somehow out of my body, and an overwhelming feeling of confusion and like doom and dread. By this point, you're not even sure that you're actually really there or if it's a dream. My body shakes, my skin feels numb and tingly, and my body literally just has to sit there in that state and endure it. After a while it starts to pass and you start feeling yourself slowly coming back again, and all those weird and scary sensations begin to leave you, and then you start to feel a bit better. It's the strangest and most terrifying feeling, and it's just so hard to explain. It's honestly one of the most frightening things you can experience, and while you are having an attack there's literally not a damn thing that you can do about it. You literally have to just sit and let it pass, and eventually it does. When I have attack now, which luckily isn't too often anymore, I know what it is, I can recognise what is happening, and although it's really, really horrible, I know it will pass, and I know if I can just bear with it, I'll be able to get through it. As a child having a panic attack, you have no idea or understanding of what the hell is happening to you. It's like the closest thing to being in hell for that minute or so when you're in the middle of it. The problem then is that you're frightened that it's going to happen again. And I remember saying little prayers like, please don't let me have one today. It's strange because I also remember times when there were certain people that I did feel safe and comfortable with, that weren't my parents, and that I formed attachments to because they were kind to me. For example, childhood friends, mums. If I was somewhere with someone I felt this way with, I would have a tendency to maybe become very hyperactive. It was almost like a feeling of freedom and euphoria that would come over me. It's really hard to explain, but eventually it was time for me to leave primary school, and the utter dread I felt was horrendous. I was having to leave primary school and go to an even bigger school with even more people, harder work, different teachers, different kids, and higher expectations. Again, I knew I had no choice and I had to go to school. There was nothing I could do about it. Inside, I was just so tired and I just couldn't take any more. In September, I started at my senior school, but it just all became too much. I think I lasted there about 2 weeks, and those 2 weeks were absolute hell, dealing with constant panic attacks and crippling anxiety. And it was just like my body gave out and it just couldn't take any more. This is when I stopped eating and just gave up. I just wanted to die. I got so weak from not eating and lost a terrible amount of weight. I was starving, but the pain of being starving was nothing like the pain I felt of having to go to school. By the January, I was then put into a unit in the grounds of Southampton Hospital, where I would have to live during the week and go home at weekends. It was horrendous, and as hard as this was for me, I can only imagine how hard this must have been for my poor parents. I honestly can't tell you how grateful I am to them for all that they tried to do for me, and I love them so incredibly much, and I've been so blessed to have my parents and their support and love through my life. I realised my parents had to do what they had to do and that they were doing their very, very best, but when I had to go away, I just felt like I was being punished. I was 11 and at my weakest I had to say goodbye to my parents, who I loved dearly and felt safest with. I was made to stay away from my home, my safety and my comfort. And I remember my first night in the unit, I went to bed and cried. I desperately wanted my mum and I just wanted to go home. The nurse on duty that night must have heard me crying, and she stomped into my room angrily telling me to stop crying and go to sleep. Thinking back now, all I needed was a hug and maybe for her to calm me down and just tuck me in. But I was scared, so I did as I was told and I tried to stop crying. I ended up staying in this unit for 6 months until I had put enough weight on to be discharged. The only issue was I'd put weight on, but all my other problems and issues were still there and again hadn't been dealt with. I was treated for the physical issues, but I wasn't treated for the psychological or emotional problems that I had. Looking back, I just can't believe how my parents and I were failed yet again. We were back to square one really, and I was even more traumatised and troubled than I had been before. I think child mental health services improved slightly since I was a child, but having spoken to friends over the last few years who are trying to seek help and support for their children who are suffering with mental health issues, these services still need drastic work, improvement and funding. So that's pretty much my mental health journey up until I was about the age of 12. There's much more to come. Thank you so much for watching, and please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Take care of yourselves and each other. Much love as always.